Wine, get up. I'm going to take a shower, okay? Okay. She mumbled sleepily and snuggled deeper into the blanket, drifting back into slumber. After taking a shower, Jungkook stepped back into the room, his damp hair slightly tousled. His gaze softened when he saw his pregnant wife still curled on the bed. Lost in her dreams, letting out a quiet sigh, he walked over, settling beside her. With gentle fingers, he brushed a stray strand of hair away from her face. Are you not feeling well? Wine stared at the sound of his voice, her movements sluggish. Slowly, she opened her sleepy eyes, shifting slightly with some difficulty. I don't know, my back just hurts a little. Jungkook's brow furrowed in concern. His hand instinctively moved to her back, rubbing it lightly. Is that so? Should I give you a massage? And if you're not feeling well, we can cancel the plan. Jungkook, she cut him off with a tired smile. I'm okay. She studied her for a moment, his jaw tightening. Then, with a resigned sigh, he leaned in and placed a soft kiss on her forehead. All right, if you say so. But when we come back, I'm giving you a massage. No arguments. Wine knew there was no point in refusing. When it came to her health, Jungkook was impossibly stubborn. So she simply noted a small chuckle escaping her lips. Jungkook adjusted the cuffs of his white dress shirt. His sharp suit perfectly tailored to his frame. He turned around, his gaze softening as he saw Wine sitting on the edge of the bed, struggling to tie the delicate ribbon of her dress. Her brows were furrowed in frustration as she fumbled with the silky fabric. Shaking his head with a small smirk, he walked over and crouched in front of her. Here, let me. Before she could protest, his warm fingers brushed against hers, taking over effortlessly. Within seconds, he tied the ribbon into a perfect bow, his knuckles grazing the small bump of her growing belly. Wine looked down at him with a soft pout. I could have done it. Jungkook tilted his head, feigning thoughtfulness. Yeah, but it's faster when I do it. Wine rolled her eyes playfully as he stood up, grabbing the delicate bracelet she had planned to wear. Instead of handing it to her, he took her wrist gently and clasped it around her hand himself. His fingers lingered, his eyes scanning her carefully. You're okay, right? His voice was quite laced with concern. If you feel tired, we are leaving early, no arguments. Wine sighed, shaking her head. Jungkook, I'm fine. It's your sister's wedding. You should be enjoying it, not hovering over me like a bodyguard. Jungkook scoffed, slipping his hands into his pockets. I'm your bodyguard. He leaned down, whispering in her ear, and your husband and your babysitter. Wine sweated his chest, laughing. You are impossible. Jungkook grinned and leaned in, pressing a feather-light kiss to her nose. Come on, let's go before you make us late. The ceremony had been beautiful, the vows had been exchanged, the couple had been showered with blessings, and now everyone was seated at a massive dining table, indulging in the grand feast. Wine sat beside Jungkook, her hands resting gently on her lap as she watched the elegant chatter happening around the table. The atmosphere was warm, laughter echoing from different corners of the hall. Jungkook, however, ate in silence, his sharp gaze flickering around the room as if he were monitoring every single thing. Wine smiled slightly, amused by how serious he looked even at his own sister's wedding. Across the table, Mrs. Jones elegantly dabbed her lips with a napkin before turning her attention to Wine. Her calculating eyes scanned Wine carefully, her lips curling into a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. So, Wine, how is everything going? Are you adjusting? Wine straightened slightly under her gaze but kept her voice calm. Yes, everything is going well. Jungkook takes care of me. Mrs. Joan hummed, sipping her wine as if processing her answer. I see. And are you keeping up with your responsibilities as a Joan? Wine pressed her lips together, understanding the weight behind her words. Before she could respond, a sudden, overly cheerful voice pierced through the air. Jungkook, the sound of his name being called in such an excited tone made Wine's head snap toward the source. But what caught her attention more was the way Jungkook's entire body stiffened beside her. His fork slipped from his fingers, landing on the table with a sharp clink. His jaw clenched, and for a moment he didn't move. Wine's eyes flickered to the woman standing a few feet away, dressed in a stunning red dress that hugged her frame perfectly. Her long dark hair cascaded down her back, her makeup flawless, but what truly caught Wine's attention was the way her eyes sparkled with delight as she looked at Jungkook, completely ignoring everyone else in the room. Jungkook's mind raced. Why is she here now? Wine's heartbeat quickened. Who is she? The woman stepped forward, a dazzling smile on her face. Jungkook, it's been so long. She gushed, her voice dripped with excitement. I can't believe I finally found you here. Jungkook let out a slow breath, his expression unreadable. Sohyun? Wine blinked. Sohyun? Before Wine could react, the woman Soyun casually walked closer, her gaze filled with familiarity as she completely ignored Wine's presence. You look so good, just like before. Her eyes roamed over him with an unmistakable fondness. Do you know how much I missed you? Wine felt something stir inside her. The way Soyun was looking at Jungkook, the way she spoke to him, it was as if she still believed she had a place in his life. As if she thought he was still hers, Soyeon giggled, touching Jungkook's arm lightly. Do you remember how we used to come to events like this together? Her eyes twinkled mischievously. I bet you miss those days too, huh? Wine's fingers curled into fists under the table. Jungkook, however, remained eerily silent. His sharp eyes darkened, his lips pressing into a thin line. Soyeon smiled slightly, leaning in as if trying to whisper something to him. But before she could get any closer, Wine abruptly stood up. With swift movements, she reached out and grabbed Soyun's wrist, stopping her in her tracks. Soyun blinked, startled. Wine tilted her head, her voice calm but firm. I think you are mistaken. Soyun frowned. What? He took a step closer, her grip tightening ever so slightly. You see, you are speaking as if Jungkook is still yours. She let out a soft chuckle. But let me introduce myself properly. Wine's lips curled into a sweet yet dangerous smile. I am Wine, Mrs. Joan, Jungkook's wife. Soyeon's entire body stiffened, her expression dropping in an instant. Wife? She stuttered, eyes widening in shock. Wine gave a small, satisfied note. Soyeon's lips parted as if to say something, but no words came out. Her eyes darted to Jungkook, expecting some kind of denial, some kind of action, but Jungkook remained silent, his gaze locked onto Wine with something unreadable in his expression. Sovereign swallowed, her confident demeanor wavered for the first time. Wine, on the other hand, didn't falter. She gave Sovereign's wrist one last squeeze before letting go. I hope that clears things up for you. And with that, she sat back down beside her husband, her fingers interlocking with Jungkook's under the table. Soyeon stood frozen, completely catch off guard. Jungkook exhaled slowly, finally breaking his silence. He should not have come, Soyeon. The night had just gotten interesting. Jungkook's jaw clenched as his grip on Sohyun's wrist tightened. Without a second thought, he yanked her away from the massive dining area, dragging her toward a quieter corner of the hall. His movements were sharp, his steps firm, exuding nothing but pure authority. Wine, noticing the shift in his demeanor, immediately followed, her heart pounding. She didn't trust Soyun. Not after the way she had called out Jungkook's name with such familiarity, not after the way her eyes had shamelessly scanned him as if he still belonged to her. The moment they were far enough from the crowd, Soyun ran her wrist free, scolding as she rubbed her reddened spot where Jungkook had grabbed her. What the hell, Jungkook? Why are you acting like this? Jungkook inhaled sharply, rubbing his temples as if her voice alone was giving him a headache. He turned to face her, his dark eyes glinting with cold irritation. Because you don't belong here. His tone was sharp, laced with finality, yet Soyun honest scoffed, folding her arms across her chest. Oh, so now I don't belong. That's funny because the last time I checked, I was the one who once had your heart. Her voice dripped with bitterness, her lips curling into a smirk as she took a slow step forward. Wine stood to the side, watching intently, her fingers instinctively curling into fists. You don't love her, Jungkook. She's just a replacement, isn't she? Her voice dropped into a whisper, sultry and dangerous. You still love me, I know you do. Jungkook didn't flinch. Instead, he let out a slow, mirthless chuckle. Soyun, his voice was deep, mired, and laced with venom. He took a step closer. You're so delusional, it's actually sad. Soyun blinked momentarily, thrown off by his cold rejection. Jungkook tilted his head slightly, his sharp jawline prominent under the dim lighting. Let me spell it for you. His voice was slow, deliberate. I love wine. She's not a replacement, she's my wife. Soyun's expression faltered, a flicker of disbelief crossed her features, but she quickly masked it with a scoff. No, no, that's not true. You're lying to yourself. A soft chuckle broke through the tense air. Why? She finally stepped forward, standing beside Jungkook, her arms folded as she looked at Soyun. Oh, he's not lying. Soyun turned to glare at her, her lips pressing into a thin line. He loves me, and not just that. Jungkook's gaze softened slightly as he turned his head to look at Wine, sensing what she was about to say. Wine tilted her chin up slightly, her voice unwavering. I'm carrying his child. Soyun visibly tensed. Her eyes widened in shock as her breath hissed. The color drained from her face. You? What? Wine placed a gentle hand over her belly, a small smile playing at her lips. You heard me, I'm pregnant with his baby. Jungkook's hold around Wine's waist tightened, pulling her protectively against him. His gaze darkened once again as he turned back to Soyun. And I will do anything to protect them. Soyun stumbled back, shaking her head in disbelief. Her lips quivered as Wake twisted inside her, an unbearable jealousy burning in her chest. No, no, this isn't happening. And then, in a fit of blind rage, she raised her hand, aiming to slap Wine across the face. But before her hand could even reach its target, Jungkook moved. His reflexes were lethal. He slashed her wrist midair, his grip tightening so hard that Soyun let out a small gasp. His other hand shot into her hair, tangling into the strands before yanking her back with force. Soyeon let out a sharp cry, trembling as she clutched his wrist. Jungkook, let go. Jungkook leaned in, his voice dropping to a dangerously low whisper. You dare raise your hand on my wife? Soyeon whimpered, struggling in his grip. You must be out of your mind. One watched the scene unfold with calm amusement, her lips curving into a smirk. Oh, poor you, Soyeon. She sighed dramatically. Looks like you lost, huh? Soyeon glared at her with pure hatred, her breathing heavy and erratic. Shut up, you. Before she could finish, Jungkook yanked her hair again, making her hiss in pain. Watch your mouth. His voice was calm, but the deadly edge in his tone made Soyun freeze. You don't get to insult my wife? Soyun clenched her jaw, her face burning with humiliation. Jungkook didn't let go just yet. Instead, he lowered his voice even further, making sure only she could hear his next words. I regret ever knowing you. Soyun sucked in a sharp breath. His words stung worse than anything else. He finally released her with a slight shove, causing her to stumble backward. Leave, his voice was void of warmth. Now, Soyun stood frozen for a moment, her mind blank, her pride shattered. One last look into Jungkook's eyes told her everything she needed to know. There was no love left, no longing, nothing. She had truly lost him. Humiliated and defeated, she turned on her heel and stormed away, disappearing into the crowd. The moment she was gone, Jungkook exhaled sharply, his shoulders relaxing as he turned to whine. She was looking up at him, that same amused smirk on her lips. You really don't hold back, do you? Jungkook let out a breathless chuckle, shaking his head. Not when it comes to you. One human satisfaction, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his chest. Good. Jungkook's arms instinctively wrapped around her, holding her close. He pressed a lingering kiss on her forehead, whispering against her skin. Let's go back. You need to eat. One smiled, nodding, with one last glance in the direction Soyun had disappeared. Jungkook smiled. He knew one thing for sure. Soyun would never dare cross the line again. And if she did, he wouldn't be so merciful next time.